Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. And today I have the honor of being joined by Latasha Matthews, author of, and I need to put my reading glasses on, The Dumping Ground, a guide to gaining powerful skills to set life-changing boundaries. That is a powerful subtitle. Powerful, powerful. And I know that you are a licensed professional counselor and life coach, and there's the stigma about getting help. So I'm hoping that today's conversation results in individuals getting some insight into the power of getting counseling, even if it's starting with a book, right? Just to start that journey, but to also realize that whatever they're going through is not necessarily unique to them. We are all have going through, will go through things. And it's important to know you're not alone. So tell our listening and viewing audience all things about Latasha Matthews, licensed professional counselor.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Lisa. As Lisa stated, I am Latasha Matthews, and I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia, Nevada, and I provide telehealth services in Florida. I have been practicing in Lawrenceville, Georgia for about 15 years. In addition to that, I am a clinical supervisor. So, what that means is that I help other clinicians who are aspiring to work with individuals, couples, and children. I also am just passionate about mental health and emotional wellness more than anything else because you're either healthy or you're not. And so I think that there is a stigma behind mental health. So when you think about it, if we break it down, you're either emotionally well or you're not. And so that may help those that don't want to think about the mental piece. In addition to that, I love training individuals. That would be corporations and women in leadership because I work with a lot of high achieving women that deal with a lot of stress. Stress falls under the umbrella of mental health as well and emotional wellness. And I write, I teach, and I consult also.
I love it. And I like that you talked about that you're helping them really become a better version of themselves. And I know growing up in the Black church, we used to just say, just turn it over to the Lord and he's going to work it out. And then I'm reminded of a scripture that says faith without work is dead. So you got to put in the work, right, to get to the end result, which may involve a professional counselor. And one of the things that I have found in working in healthcare, auditing medical records, I have found that even the psychiatrist got a therapist, right? Because we're sitting in front of them, you guys dumping all this information. And I think about me and the work that I do in reading, for example, behavioral health, mental health records, and I see some of the challenges that individuals go to, suicidal home ideation, all those things. And I have to check my mental status when I'm even reading the record to make sure it's not dumping on me. And I remember one time being in New Mexico, being surrounded in this room with four walls with behavioral health charts stacked up to the ceiling that I was reviewing, right? I was there for a couple of weeks and I had to put on my religious music. I had to get up about every hour to kind of just check myself. But I also was reminded that there could be one defining moment that transitions you from where you are into a state that is not healthy. And you need to be thankful for what you have. And if you don't think you have all the things, you need to be happy for what you have, but also recognize what triggers you and when you need the help and not be ashamed to get the help because it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. One moment can change everything, and you can be represented in the charts that you were reading. So that's some heavy lifting when you're reading over and over again. What we call that is secondary trauma, where you are not in it, but you're in it. And so I'm glad you were able to kind of step away and step back in, which is what I have to do as well. That's the boundary, right?
Oh yeah, you have to set that personal boundary. And at one point I found myself like, oh, what if that's my grandparent, right? When I was doing some Jerry psych, right? What if that's my grandparent? What if that's my parents? And so I constantly had to continue to check myself, play my music, keep my status where I needed to be. But I remember the day that I decided that I didn't want to be here anymore and I took 30
Mm.
Tylenol. I'm reminded of my stomach being pumped, right? And the few hours that I spent in Heart Grove Hospital here in Chicago, realizing that I was okay, but that one moment, and mine was situational. I had 2 years prior had given a birth to a special needs daughter. I was raising her by myself. She can't hear, she can't talk. But I realized in that moment that God gave her to me for a reason and that I needed to be here to care for her. So 32 years later, here we are, and life is sweet. But it wasn't until 2022 that I even started to share my own story. And
Mm.
not because I was ashamed of it, it was just I kind of swept it under the rug and moved on with life. And once I started to shift, I realized that I had been through some things, right? And a lot of times people look at you and they think you got it all together, but they don't know you be in the car crying, in the tub crying, right? Sitting down watching TV crying. So I really want people to know that it's okay not to be okay, but you got to get some help.
Mm. Yes, yes. Look at you advocating for mental health during Mental Health Awareness Month. Yes.
Yes. You know what? Mental health, I realize this mental health and physical health are walking down the street together.
They cousins, girl. They like,
Yeah.
no, they
Yeah.
twins. They like conjoined twins.
Yes, they are. And I think because of the stigma, and I saw this during the pandemic where we saw more of it emerge, like it was there, but it started to emerge. And as I drive here in Chicago and I see people on the expressway just so angry driving, and then all of a sudden people pulling out guns and all kind of stuff, it's like, man, we got to get it together.
Yes, yes. So,
So listen, I want to know what made you decide to write your book? Because I never thought I would write a book. So I'm interested in knowing what made you publish your work of art.
yeah, yeah. So, thank you for sharing your story. As we started to talk about the importance of reading, um, there's also a piece that is very therapeutic for all people, specifically African Americans, to be able to African American women, men, to be able to tell our stories, but also heal as we share those stories. And to be honest, when I was writing my book, that was the first time I've ever experienced anxiety. At this point, I was a mental health professional. I did not have any diagnosis when I entered the field. But one of the things I realized is that I had a lot of shame as I wrote. It was me and God, like, I don't want this, I can't. It was a lot of tug of war with writing because I had to also admit that I had poor boundaries. Didn't have them, was people pleasing all over the world, was manipulating people, because that's what people pleasing is. It's lying and manipulating people to get something that you need. I had to admit that in some cases I did that, and that I wasn't happy with myself, and I wasn't all that I presented on the outside. And so um, the book came after meeting with a therapist who introduced this word boundary to me. And I'm like, I ain't learned that growing up. What's a boundary? And she walked me through all of these areas that I was angry on the inside that I wouldn't share with others, and started to help me unpack, how to say no and how to identify what my values were.
You're not going to tell these folks everything that's in the book. They need to get their own copy of the book. But I have a really close friend who kicked off 2024, 52 authors, 52 weeks. And the title of her book, watch this, Speak Up, I Can't Hear You, the Voice of a Woman. And in your book, chapter 4, you say, can't hear you. Are you using your voice effectively? And as I work in healthcare, in leadership capacities, I realize that a lot of people are not using their voice.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's they grew up in the be seen and not heard generation. They have work hurt, right? Where somebody told them not to speak. They may have imposter syndrome. But as a parent of a special needs child who will never be able to utter a word, I made it
Mm.
my mission that not only would I advocate for her, but that I would advocate for me as well and show
Mm.
others the power of self-advocacy. And it's not being bougie, selfish, snobby, all the things that people say when you care and advocate for yourself. It's about loving yourself so that you can be in a place to love others. Because if you don't love yourself, how can you help those that you serve personally and professionally? I don't
Yes,
know about you, but I don't want nobody hurt messing with me. I need
yes,
them to
yes.
heal.
Mm.
So
Yes, and
what?
I do.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say I do, and you're right. I think one of the things I had to really look at is if I'm not able to assert myself or really speak my truth, I have a I have lots of relationships that I'm really being unauthentic in, because I'm not really telling them how I feel. So it's a lie. So I'm lying over here at work. I'm lying in this relationship. I'm lying in this friendship. And so I mean, it just, it's not really helpful. It doesn't give individuals the opportunity to make the change, or it doesn't give individuals the opportunity to say, okay, well, that doesn't work for me. So it's manipulative at the core level. And then we add nice words like people pleasing, or, you're meek, or all of those other things. And we know that, in the Black church, we can take a scripture and really mess it up.
Mess it
We
up
can we
all
can
the
say
way.
that you're supposed to, you know, meekness is not, you don't stand up for yourself. There's this notion that, oh, I'm supposed to be like this and I'm not supposed to say anything because that's thus says the Lord. That's thus says a lie. He does not give you a voice and for you to not use it. And so it's important for us to not manipulate words either when we're talking about setting boundaries.
I love it. I read this book a few years ago about setting boundaries. And I think in the workplace, a lot of us struggle, especially as Blacks, we struggle with saying no for fear of retaliation, even though the law says, you're not supposed to be able to retaliate it against, but it can happen. And so we take on all these things, dumping it on ourselves, and which in turn impacts how we operate in our household and our friendships and all the things just because of what's happening over there. And a lot of times it's like business as usual. And I know for me, in 2003, I hit that golden age, the big 5-0. And I made a decision to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's when I was free to move about the country, move about the world. I realized what my purpose, what my assignment was, and all the reading and all the things I have been doing the last couple of decades are meeting me today, meeting
Mm,
me today. And
mm,
so I'm on this mission to get others to get in alignment with their purpose, because this world has so much to offer. And if you on a hamster, just going around hamster wheel, going around and around in a circle, you look up and it's 2030 and you like, what had happened? And I don't want to live like that. My grandfather is 103 years old right
mm, God bless
now.
him.
And when I think about the joy that he has when you see him, if you need me, call me. Now he 103. He telling you, if you need me, call you. He is in alignment with his purpose, right? He's lived longer than a lot of people have lived. And I just look at him and I'm like, I'm gonna be like that. Be like that walking around, still getting around. But I gotta make sure that I continue to feed my soul and feed my purpose and my assignment and keep on going. And those people who are supposed to be with me, they gonna be with me, and the other ones gonna fall off. And I'm
That's
okay with
right.
them falling off.
And some of them, I mean, if we're really being honest, a lot of people should have been fell off.
Huh.
We be we be we be holding them on. They should have been gone. And so I do think that when you talk about, turning 50, uh, for me, it was like I woke up and it was really clear that there's just this clarity that comes. There is this freedom, and now I'm allowing curiosity to lead. So sometimes we have these structures and plans, and so really allowing, the Holy Spirit to do more leading. I know when I was younger, you'd be like, "Oh, the Holy Spirit is guiding me and leading me," and I'm like, "Nope, this is my plan. This is my plan." But now it's like I'm curious and I allow it to lead me, and it opens you up, not to not be in alignment, but it just opens you up for more of more purposeful work.
Oh, I love that. And you know what I had to do in the medical community when patients are in really bad accidents, in particular, sometimes like kids, and they put them on extracorporeal membrane oxygenation so that the body can rest. Sometimes you got to take yourself out of the space with everybody else and allow your body, your mind, your spirit to rest so that you can be refueled to go and fight. And I had to a couple of times put myself on ECMO. And when I came out, I was like, all right, now what? Right. But I had to realize the need for that. And
Mm,
I think you're right. I didn't think about it. That curiosity on this other side of 50, now 51, I'm like, what's up, world? I'm ready, right? I don't know
mhm.
what's going to happen next, but I'm just along for the ride, and I'm continuing to prepare myself, but also shedding all this stuff that I don't need to take on the journey with me. And speaking of
Mm.
shedding, I told you I'm going to Atlanta. I love Atlanta. You talk about one of my favorite places that I always try to get to when I'm there for some scattered and splattered pancakes. No, not pancakes, waffles. The Waffle House. You talk about using food for comfort. When you're on a trip now, you got to get you some waffles when you're on a trip, because we don't have a Waffle House in Chicago, not the original one. So tell us about this high stress and finding yourself eating, and how did it make you feel, and what do you want others to know that honestly are doing the same thing?
Yes, definitely. Food, and if we're talking about the Black community,
Come on, help somebody.
we can talk about all communities, but we're gonna talk about the Black community. Food is the gathering place. It's where everything feels good. It's the Christmas dinner, it's the Thanksgiving dinner, it's the 4th of July. If you were raised in a Black community, there's going to be food. And so there's nothing wrong with food, but I think what our ancestors and what our um, parents used food for didn't tell the whole story. So some of our ancestors have a lot of secondary consequences that go with the food. It's
Sugar.
the diabetes, it's the high blood pressure, it's the sugar, it's the gout, it's all of the things, but we still eat the food because it makes us feel good. It makes us feel good when we don't have the bank account, the funds ain't funding. It makes us feel good when the relationship ends. It makes us feel good until it makes us sleepy. And so, one of the things that we have to identify is how do we feel? That's another thing that we didn't talk about back in the day. You can feel nothing because your mama would say, I don't care how you feel. And so now we have this thought process that I can push down my feelings and I can put a whole bunch of stuff in my mouth so I can avoid, needing to pay this mortgage, or we about to get evicted, or my husband cheated, or my wife cheated, and all of these things. And so it's important for us to identify that food is a gift just like anything else. But anytime we take a gift when we use it in the wrong way, it becomes a deterrent.
Mm. Mm. So you mean them family reunions and them
Mhm.
big, big, big meals where you got so much food, you can feed your family, the other folks' family down the block, and some that are experiencing homelessness. That mean that meal, that's one of the
That,
meals,
that
right?
that's one of the meals I'm talking about. That's one of the meals I'm talking about. And I think it's the easiest go-to. It's the one thing that if you have at least $10 in your pocket, you can control. You can go get some chips, you can go get some cookies, you can control it. And so it speaks to the fact that we don't have control, and eating a lot of food is not going to give us control. It's going to give us some of those other things that we talked about, and it's only temporary. And so that chapter really speaks to the boundary that we have to first set with ourselves so we can identify that is there a healthier option? So if I'm going to do the food, can I do something that's healthier that's not going to cause this secondary thing that I'm going to need some help from later?
Mm. You know what? I think also the other aspect, as a person who has suffered with obesity most of my adult life, one of the things that I found that has really been working for me in terms of trying to fight these, older age conditions, even though they can happen when they're younger, is
Mm-hmm.
altering how I operate. So, for example, I am on the computer a lot. I'm doing these interviews, or I'm working in healthcare. And so, one of the things I started doing, you see here, I'm standing up, right? And I'm standing up because I'm trying to keep that metabolism high. I'm trying to do things to fight what I don't want to happen, because if I want to do all these things in life, I got to be physically, mentally, emotionally ready to do them. And I can't
Yes.
if I'm always sitting down. And so I decided I was not taking life sitting down, that I was going to be standing up.
Yes, yes. And to your point, I have a standing lift as well. I don't use it as much, but I purchased it during COVID because I felt like the clients that I was supporting during that time, it was just heavier. So I needed something to kind of break up all of that sitting down.
Yes.
But in between sessions, getting up, walking outside, getting some sun, all of those things. Not going to the refrigerator, making a conscious effort to go the other way. Just some intentionality, definitely no judgment, because I do think it's important for us to identify, um, also if someone's listening, if you had to choose between food and a drug, the person's going to say, well, this is the better of the two. As a therapist, I would, if I'm working with someone and they say, okay, it's either this or that, then we're going to work in the context of that. So if someone's listening and they're like, okay, yeah, this is better than what I'm doing before, then we applaud you for that. You just want to know what the secondary consequences to all things, that we all have to set our own internal boundaries to be able to say, you know what? I have to set a boundary with this because it's not going to be helpful later on.
Wow, you keep saying boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. I can tell that that is something that you ain't read about. That's something that you are living, breathing, experiencing, because it's coming through from inside out.
Mm.
And I've worked with so many people who struggle with boundaries. And I actually read a book. I'm always reading a book, but I read a book called The One Thing. And the one thing helped me set some boundaries as well, because I had a habit of having 10 million things going on at one time that I was trying to get done. And I would meet with my administrative assistant and I'd be like, okay, what's pending? And then we got this whole list. And so I had to tell myself every day, write down the one priority for the day. At the end of the day, I'm writing down that I did it, as opposed to trying to do all of these things, but also not accepting new things when I haven't cleared my plate. Because my plate was so full that I was shrinking, trying to maintain. And once I started setting that boundary of, okay, one thing that's priority for the day. Okay, if you can do another thing, I'm not talking about like if I'm on a project for a hospital or something like that, I'm going to get those things done. But even that, when someone tries to say, oh, well, what's the status of this? Let me finish this first. And then I'm going to use everybody else's word, pivot to this one. Because if my mind is all over the place, I feel like that's when you make mistakes. And I was
Yes.
the queen of multitasking. And I really have reeled it back. And it's been freeing. Like, oh, you don't have to multitask. You don't have to be the overachiever, right? I decided that for my own mental health, one thing at a time was better.
Mm.
And not dumping more stuff onto my plate. We do that with food, huh?
You do that with food.
Wow. So I know we're almost out of time. Everybody has a favorite chapter in the book. What's your favorite?
Um, let's see. I
Don't say the
have,
conclusion. Writing a
let
book
me
is
see.
so
Oh,
freeing, but when it's done, you're like, yes. Now, and the reason
yeah, I
I
think
said don't say conclusion, because you start off conclusion by saying boundaries, boundaries, boundaries.
mhm. I would say it's the chapter um, that I think I have the most unfinished work in. The one that I believe comes from some generational stuff is the chapter on finances. I think you can do the physical stuff. You can, move the plate away. You can do lots of things to help you physically. You can say no. You can do some emotional work. You can go to therapy. But the financial piece sometimes comes from um, generations of unlearning. I think that you can work on setting a budget one day and then something can happen that you takes you off your budget
You walking down
and
my
then
street.
I'm just saying it's the hardest because you can be doing so well in setting a boundary and then it's for me it's easier to kind of get off track. And so sometimes you're wanting to go to the deep and say, how did I get here? And then you have things that are coming now. So you have the parking lot. How did I get here? And deal with the here and now. And so that's the chapter chapter that I think getting more resources, making sure that you have some good, solid financial people around that will help you kind of pick apart some things, whether it's financial planners, whether it's investors, whatever the case may be. And as business owners, we definitely don't need to be, you know, dipping and dabbing in that stuff ourselves. We need to hire or acquire. Acquiring the skill in our 50s, we don't got time for that. So we
Nope.
need to put some money to the side and say, tell me what I need to do, and then teach me to do it. Tell me the benefit, and then we just do it.
Mm, 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 mm. You have talked about so many aspects of gaining powerful skills to set these life-changing boundaries from financial is one that I have struggled with so much, and it's a struggle because at one point in my life I was working and hustling, so I was shopping and traveling and doing all these things, and now at the over 50 age I'm like, okay, you got to get rid of this debt because at some point I'm I don't think I'm gonna retire. I think I'm gonna just die doing what I do, but I don't want to be older with this heavy load that I'm carrying. So
Mhm.
I have become a little consumed with my credit card debt in particular. On
Mhm.
my
I'm with you.
spreadsheet, I have the balance, my available credit, the interest rate. So I'm doing the strategies to pay things off, the snowball approach. And then maybe the next week, I'm like, oh, you did this one project. You can hit this big one and it's every day I'm waking up. And then I keep saying to myself, and you just said it, I know how I got here, but what I have to work on is once I pull myself out, not going back. And
Yes.
one of my guests on another show that I do talked about freezing her credit cards. And she put them in the freezer so she can kind of forget them. But today she got an 850 credit score, $100,000 in available credit for her credit cards. She pays her cards off every month. I'm like, bless your ministry. Because I just be trying to make the minimum and then figure out which
Yes.
one I'm going to pay. And I
Yes.
think that's so important for people to know that they look at us and they think we got it all together, and we don't.
Mm-mm, we still
We
figuring it out.
Yeah, we're a work in progress. So tell our listening viewing audience how they can find you, because they may not even know where Atlanta is. Because it's so big. Like when you say Atlanta, it's like Midtown, Buckhead,
Yes.
Conyers, all these different places.
Yes. Yes. So, for those who are, wanted to just check me out on social media, I am at Latasha Matthews Speaks on Instagram. And then my company name on all of the platforms is Why to Live Well, because these boundaries help you live well. I did want to share with your listeners that I am coming out with a second book, and it's really a part two to the boundary setting. What I've learned, Dr. Lisa, over the years is that I have mastered the art of saying no. But no is only half of the story. Um, so now I'm saying no, but what do I want to say yes to? So my new book speaks about boundaries, but it talks about the active yes for well-being. I talked a little bit about in the beginning about being able to know what your core values are. Those are all the yeses. I think as I'm looking back now, I needed to learn how to say no in that season. But now that I know how to say no, I need to understand the importance of what I want to say yes to. So the no gets a little easier. So the active yes to well-being will be coming out soon.
I love it. So that means we're going to have you back on the show
Yes. Yes,
because
ma'am.
this is about us reaching people where they are, because they may not necessarily come to us first, right? They may need to see and hear us and say, let me call Latasha Matthews, because I felt her. on that episode, and I believe that she's my person to help me with my journey. And so, the young folks, they all into the videos and all of that. So, and I like the videos as well, because just hearing people talk about their story, I realize I'm not alone. I'm so glad you
Yeah.
just set me free by talking
Mhm.
about finances again, right? It's one thing to see it, it's another thing to hear it. Um,
Yes.
and so it, first of all, lets me know I'm on the right track. I just need to keep going and
Yes,
not,
I got a spreadsheet just like you, Dr. Lisa. We checking it off. Check, check, check.
yes, yes. Well, do you have any final thoughts for our listening, viewing audience before we leave today?
I first want to thank you. I think this is an amazing mission. I know God is going to bless it. You are definitely walking in your purpose. And for those who want to understand the importance of setting boundaries and keeping them, just follow me for tips.
I love it. Well, listen, everyone, this has been another amazing, amazing episode. 52 authors, 52 weeks. I will see you next week.